Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. So, yes, I'm coming to you from the same backyard. This is so fun. Usually I'm sitting inside, but I decided, since we're talking about healing the world, I decided as I spoke just to show you a little bit more of it. So we're in this beautiful backyard where I normally shoot the other segments from, so I hope you enjoy. So far this month, we've been exploring the theme of healing. We've been talking about personal healing. Reverend Chris last week talked about sacred and spiritual and holistic healing. So today what I'd like to do is widen the circle a little bit, broaden the topic, and talk about healing our world. And what I specifically want to talk about, at least in part, is the concept from the Jewish mystical tradition called Tikkun Olam, or healing the world, or repairing the world. It is a call to each of us, and that's what I'd like to talk about this week. So as an interspiritual community, what do? We have the joy of exploring many faith traditions for the wisdom each one gives us. Through story or metaphor, imagery or legend, each one conveys the truth that we are here for a purpose, to bring our gifts to make this broken world whole, to lift each other up, to heal and renew each other. They tell us also, and this is the good news, that we do not make this journey alone. We are accompanied by the holy at every step, if only we can be aware. Sometimes we're not. But when we make that effort to lift up our eyes and open ourselves up to that sacred presence around us, as Reverend Chris was talking about last week, it makes such a huge difference. So in recent weeks and months, we have seen and we have lived so many calls to come together to heal our global community. Every day, when you turn on the news, you see so many different calls to come together and to heal. From the heartbreaking news coming this week and last week and earlier from Afghanistan, where so many again now live in fear and violence and uncertainty, to the wildfires that continue to burn in our own West, to drought and food shortages in so many parts of the world, to floods elsewhere, to melting glaciers and warming oceans, threatening such profound changes for all life on this beautiful planet. We live in the midst of so many calls for healing and so many opportunities that we have to make a difference, small or large. So I was on a Zoom call last week, a One World Zoom call, and we were discussing some of the troubles in our world, some of the troubles I've just talked about. And one of the folks on the call asked, well, why can't God just fix it? Why doesn't God just fix all this stuff? So when I said that, what came into your mind? What is your answer to that? Why doesn't God just fix it? She's God, right? The God of miracles. What does she do? She moves mountains, parts seas, stops the sun in the sky. That's God. Amazing stuff. Why doesn't God just fix all our problems and hand us a world shiny, new, and clean? Your answer may be a lot similar to mine. I don't think that's how God works, at least not in my experience. There is no faith tradition I can find or I have read that tells us to sit back and wait until God cleans up our mess. No matter how wonderful that might sound. They tell us that we are called to healing ourselves. We are given guidance, inspiration, faith, and even hope. But then we have to get up and take those steps ourselves. In my life, I have found that healing and renewal come when I am able, whenever that happens, whenever I am able, to take those first steps myself, even if I can't see the whole path. Sometimes all we can see is that next step. I think probably if you thought about your life, you might find that the same thing has been true. Sometimes all you can see is that next step. And often it's uncomfortable, and it may even be wildly inconvenient. One of my favorite authors, I've spoken about her before, is Anne Lamott. And in her book, Help, Thanks, Wow, she puts it this way. But where do we even start on the daily walk of restoration and awakening? We start where we are. We find God in our human lives, and that includes the suffering. I get thirsty people glasses of water, even if that thirsty person is just me. My friend Tom goes through the neighborhood and picks up litter, knowing there will be just as much tomorrow. We visit those shut-ins whom a higher power seems to have entrusted to our care. Various relatives, often aging and possibly annoying, or stricken friends from our church communities, people in jails or mental institutions who might be related to us, who benefit from hearing our own resurrection stories. My personal belief, she writes, is that God looks through her Rolodex when she has a certain kind of desperate person in her care and assigns that person to some screwed up soul like you or me, and makes it hard for us to ignore that person's suffering. So we show up, even when it's extremely inconvenient or just awful to be there. I love that image. One goal of our spiritual practices, what is it? They give us tools to get up and move, to respond, to answer when God's Rolodex brings up our name. It's not always fun, and it's not always convenient. So a couple of years ago, Reverend Sidney McGill Lindquist and I taught a class on world religions to a seniors group here in Roswell. The group is called Senior Enriched Living. It's a wonderful group. We had a fabulous time. When I was preparing for the class on Judaism, I called up Mitch Cohen, a friend of mine and a former rabbi, and asked him for one takeaway he would like to give to a class of Roswell seniors, most of them non-Jews, exploring Judaism. Mitch is so funny. He said, okay, you want me to take a tradition of 4,000 years with complex political, religious, and social currents running through it at every level and sum it up in a phrase. I said, yeah, that would be good. So Mitch is always up to the task. He said, okay, when people ask me this, here's what I say. And here's what he said. Judaism is a religion sourced in history, teaching us to live in the here and now, based on deeds and actions, with little or no emphasis on the hereafter. The focus is on how we live right now, how we lift each other up, how we heal and restore each other. So every faith tradition asks the fundamental question of how we best live, what brings us fulfillment and wholeness and renewal, what heals us, in other words, what leads us closer to becoming clear channels of the divine that we are here to be. There are different answers to this question. Some advocate sitting on a mountaintop, laying aside all the detail and all the stuff in this world. Certainly people choose that path. The Jewish tradition says no. We live a holy life, an awakened and a meaningful life, by showing up right here and right now as fully as we possibly can, with all the flaws and the warts that each one of us brings, by picking up the call when God picks us out of her Rolodex, even though sometimes, if I can continue the metaphor, all we want to do is let that call roll over to voicemail. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. I didn't get your mail. And there we are, fine and happy, but we have not answered the call. Our purpose, the very source of our joy and meaning, is to heal ourselves and our world by bringing our full humanity to it. Every moment gives us this opportunity. Our spiritual practices, our daily practices, help to bring us closer to our humanity, our vulnerability, our compassion, our hopes, bringing the holy presence each one of us can be into the mix of this messy, chaotic, and often heartbreaking world. That is our task, to bring our humanity to the goal of healing each other. It's such a privilege to contemplate being able to do that. Jewish mysticism, the tradition called the Kabbalah, has a wonderful imagery for this concept. It's Tikkun Olam, which is healing the world or repairing the world. According to this tradition, the Creator, or Yahweh, designed creation so that we, human beings, can bring about the wholeness and the unity that was lost at the beginning of time, when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden and humans were expelled into the world. Now, there are many versions of this early story. That is one I don't want you to think from this short 20-minute talk that this is all there is to Tikkun Olam, so I encourage you to do some reading about it, to do some study about it. It is a fascinating and a wonderful concept. Anyway, at that time, when Adam and Eve were expelled, the primordial light that had been gathered into that perfect area of creation was shattered, and millions of holy sparks fell all over the universe into all events, all circumstances, all people. The light was shattered, and sparks fell all throughout the universe, all throughout our world. The human task, Tikkun Olam teaches, is to find and recover the holy sparks that are present and yet hidden all around us. There is a holy spark in every moment, every person, every opportunity. Our job with discernment and love is to find it and restore it, and by so doing, contribute to the healing of the world that only we can accomplish. It changes the way you look at things. You look at things asking yourself, where is the holy spark in this moment, in this opportunity, in this person? The concept of Tikkun Olam began with the belief that this task, to gather and restore the world to its original wholeness, was given only to the Jewish people. However, later sages and teachers point out that indeed it is given to all of us. Author Howard Schwartz wrote in 2011, "In our own time, we should be able to read this myth in a more universal sense about God having created all of humanity to gather the sparks. The goal, to restore the world, is obviously critical to future survival. It can only be fulfilled if all of humanity collaborates on this endeavor." So we ask ourselves, in each task, each person, each situation, what is the holy spark here? There is one. What is my task here? I have one. To restore what is holy right here. To restore what is broken back into wholeness. So how do we encounter problems when we do this? What is the problem in doing this? We doubt our ability to make a difference. You know, we bring our humanity to it, but so often our humanity involves our fears and our judgments, and we exercise those in moments like this. We doubt our ability to do it. We believe someone else can do it better. We'll be smarter and more able. We undervalue our gifts. We protest we cannot rise up to the challenge. We think, you must be thinking of someone else. Keep looking in that Rolodex, because someone else is in there who can do this better. We focus on our brokenness and we neglect our strength, our resilience, and our wholeness. If you read the Hebrew Bible, you'll see that every time a prophet was approached with a call from God, what did they say? This is what they said, basically, you must be joking. You cannot have picked me for this job. Moses, what was he doing? He was tending his father-in-law's flock. He observes a bush that is blazing but is not consumed. Okay, that's a little strange. He goes closer and God speaks to him, telling him that he is being sent to Pharaoh to free his people from the grip of the Egyptians. Moses does what most of us would do. He says, "You are kidding." In biblical language, he says, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" That's the question we ask. Who am I that I should do this? In the Holy Quran, when the angel Gabriel appears to Muhammad on Mount Hira on that night in 610 and tells him to recite, Muhammad says more than once, "I cannot recite. No, not me." He does this 3 times. When he awakes from the state into which he has fallen, he runs home and he throws himself into his wife's lap, telling her that he has surely lost his mind. God approaches Jeremiah at a young age and tells him he is to prophesy. Jeremiah says, "I cannot do this. I am only a youth." None of these people thought he was up to the job, but they were the ones called to do it. Even though they apparently believed their gifts were not enough, they were wrong. We just don't know until we get that call, until we take that first step. To make it even more uncertain, we also don't know how our gifts are going to be received. It doesn't matter. Author Wayne Mueller tells the story of the time he went to visit a friend of his named Simon who was dying. Simon was frightened and alone, and he didn't understand what was happening. So Wayne spent much of the time speaking with him, trying to give him some spiritual inspiration, digging deep to give him pearls of wisdom that would help him weather this journey. Telling him about feelings, telling him about the rhythm between sadness and joy, not getting caught up in the reasons why he was feeling certain things. He felt when he left that Simon felt lighter, and he was glad that his insights had brought some healing. So just before he left, Simon said, "You know, Wayne, I really didn't understand most of what you said, but I like your company and the sound of your voice." So Wayne wrote that all the time he thought he was being inspirational and wise and conveying this truth that Simon was getting healed from. Simon just liked his company and the way he sounded, but that was enough. That was the gift. Sometimes we just don't know when or how we are gathering up sparks to make our world whole. We just need to keep taking that next step with love and discernment, trusting that it is our step to take. So where do you see holy sparks? They are all around us, sitting next to us, right outside the door, at the end of the phone, on our calendar, down there on our to-do lists. They are all around us. So, despite all the problems we see every time we power up our computer or look at our phone, this is not a time for despair or resignation. We are, each of us, a channel for the holy acting in this world. Nothing changes that. We will be given opportunities to serve, and in so doing, we heal our communities, our world, and ourselves. Author Miriam Greenspan writes, "We each have something to contribute to the global healing process, a particular gift or vision, skill or song. Individual healing has a lot to do with finding this gift and using it for the world's sake, finding our song and singing it out. When we find a way to manifest our gift and give it to the world, no matter how small or large it may seem, we are made whole. All we need to do is say yes, even if, like the Hebrew prophets I talked about before, we are not sure we're the right pick." Interfaith chaplain and mindfulness teacher Marita Anderson wrote an essay last year about the story in Exodus chapters 6 through 9, in which God first appears to Moses and convinces him, despite Moses' doubts that we've talked about, to travel to Egypt to liberate his people. She wrote about it in the context of the challenges that today's immigrants and refugees face as they seek a place they can call home, finding rejection and refusal far more often than they find solace or help. However, her inspiration and her imagery, which I want to share with you, applies to so many more situations in our lives. In the story of Exodus, you'll remember, God has heard the cries of his people in bondage, leading him to summon Moses to the monumental task of freeing his people and leading them home. Another example, in answer to my friend's question, of God simply not reaching out to fix it. God reaches out through us. For Anderson, the Exodus story has so many layers of meaning. And again, as an aside, this is really one of the riches of Scripture. When we read the Hebrew Scriptures, the Christian, it doesn't matter, any Scriptures we read, there is so much meaning that we can find, whether we look at them allegorically or metaphysically, it doesn't matter. But what I find when I read these Scriptures is every time I do, something comes out that is new and that is inspiring. That it's the same words that have always been there, but I am different, and I am reading it and seeing it different, which is why I stress so much going to these ancient texts or even newer texts and finding what wisdom speaks to us each time. So, as she reads the story in Exodus, Anderson speaks of the flow of communication between God and Moses. She writes, "The flow of communication, the very act of listening and speaking, becomes a pathway toward freedom." I love the dynamism in that thought. The very act of listening and speaking becomes a pathway towards freedom. As they find the courage to move forward, Moses and his brother Aaron discover that through their actions, they become the bridge between God and his people. You can see that she imagines that we are all called to be such bridges. I love that imagery, each one of us acting in our own way, being a bridge between the holy and this world. The story inspires Anderson to wonder how God hears the cries of those who suffer. She writes, "I wonder if the way God hears is through the human bridges, the clergy willing to listen, the volunteers visiting prison booths, the pro bono attorneys at the borders, the grandmas showing up at bus stops with supplies, the friends pooling together for revolving bond funds, the simple moments of sharing between strangers, the whispers between people." God is not the fixer. God empowers us to be the bridges. The task of Tikkun Olam is not just to repair those injuries that are most apparent, that scream at us from the pages of the paper. Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz teaches that the phrase Tikkun Ha-Olam, repairing the world, is very similar to Tikkun He-Elam, meaning to make what is hidden visible and to repair that too. He writes, "Our job is not just to repair the world, but to make what is hidden visible and repair that too. This includes the suffering of invisible people, those vulnerable people who go through life without the concern of the broader populace." There are so many of these hidden people. We are surrounded by them, and yet how often do we fail to see them? Each is and contains a holy spark. And our task here is to ensure that they do not remain hidden, that we can reach out and work toward healing. So this sounds like such a tall order. It sounds like a full-time job. But as Anne Lamott wrote, we start where we are and we do what we can. You're not doing it all yourself. You're doing a part. You're doing your part that only you can do. We offer small things, a kind word, a card, a hug, a simple meal. We give from what we have. Wayne Mueller wrote, "If we have good humor, then laughter is our gift. If we can cook, then food is our gift. If we can make music or hold a hand or listen or build or love well, these are our gifts. The currency of our kindness flows from what we are, what we love."